On December 7, 1971, the town of Westfield, New Jersey, bustled with holiday preparations. Streets were decked out with festive decorations. With the approach of winter, an ominous feeling seemed to settle over the community. A grand mansion, nestled in a quiet neighborhood, had started to catch the attention of local residents. Week after week, there was no sign of life within the house. Strangely, the lights remained on around the clock, a detail that puzzled and unsettled neighbors. Adding to the eerie atmosphere, the sound of religious hymns echoed ceaselessly from within, sending chills through the community. As days passed, rumors about the mansion spread like wildfire. Finally, overwhelmed by concern, residents reached out to the police. No one could have anticipated the horror that awaited them. Inside the home, officers discovered a chilling scene. 5 of the 6 members of the devout List family lay brutally murdered. The gruesome discovery shocked the entire nation, a crime so horrific it felt like something from a nightmare. Authorities were left with questions. What had happened inside the mansion? And where was the 6th member of the List family? Westfield, New Jersey is a charming town celebrated for its quaint downtown, outstanding school system, and convenient access to New York City. It offers residents a refined suburban lifestyle with easy reach to the hustle and bustle of the metropolis. The town is lined with Victorian and colonial-style homes, its streets shaded by large trees preserving Westfield's historic character. With lush parks, golf courses, and numerous recreational facilities for all ages, it's a community residents are proud to call home. However, beneath its idyllic surface, Westfield bears a dark shadow from a gruesome crime that took place in 1971. The name Westfield has become entwined with the tragic fate of the List family. John List, born on September 17, 1900, was the son of John Frederick and Alma Barbara Florence, devout Lutherans of German immigrant descent. When John was born, his father was already 66 years old and his mother was 38. Growing up, John was raised in a strict religious household, which led to a strained relationship with his parents. His father was distant and his mother took full charge of his upbringing, requiring him to attend church regularly and discouraging him from any activities she deemed too risky or friends she considered unsuitable. John grew up repressed, isolated, and generally unpopular with his peers. At 18, he joined the Army. In 1943, John served in World War II and later in the Korean War. After returning home, he worked in accounting, eventually taking a position as a supervisor at a paper company. In 1951, at age 26, he met Helen Morris Taylor, a widow with a daughter named Brenda. They quickly fell in love, and shortly into their relationship, Helen told John she was pregnant. The couple married that same year, though it turned out to be a false alarm. After the wedding, John also discovered Helen had a non-contagious case of syphilis contracted from her late husband. Despite a rocky start, John and Helen settled into life together in Michigan, welcoming their first child, Patricia, on January 8, 1955. Their second child, John Frederick Jr., was born on October 21, 1956, and their youngest, Frederick Michael, arrived on August 26, 1958. Helen's health declined due to her past illness, eventually leading to blindness. The toll on her mental health was severe, resulting in depression and dependence on alcohol and medication. Meanwhile, Helen's daughter, Brenda, became pregnant at 16 and was sent to a home for young mothers. Hoping for a fresh start, John moved his family to New Jersey, purchasing an impressive mansion with financial help from his mother, Alma, who agreed to join them. In 1965, the List family settled into a grand 19-room Victorian mansion in Westfield. Outwardly, they appeared to embody the American dream. John was active in the local church, even teaching Sunday school, and the family regularly attended church services. John was determined to maintain a flawless image for his family in the eyes of society. For a while, things seemed to go well for the Lists, but it was only a fleeting happiness. By early December 1971, neighbors noticed something strange. No one had seen the Lists in weeks, and all the mansion's lights were left on continuously. Concerned, they alerted the police. On Tuesday, December 7th, officers arrived and, finding no response, entered the mansion through an open window. Inside, the air was frigid, and a strong odor filled the space. Sacred music blared from a record player, adding an eerie tone to the grim silence. In the mansion's ballroom, they made a horrifying discovery. The bodies of Helen, aged 47, and her children, Patricia, 16, John Jr., 15, and Frederick, 13, were laid out in sleeping bags, their faces covered and evidently shot. The blood-soaked towels had been meticulously packed away. As officers searched further, they found Alma List's body in an attic room on the mansion's third floor. All 5 family members were dead, but one was missing, John List. In his bedroom, authorities found 2 handguns and a 5-page letter detailing his motives. Photos of the List family revealed a chilling detail. John's face had been meticulously cut out from each one. No trace of John could be found, and he seemed to have vanished entirely. Investigators followed a trail of blood leading to the kitchen and concluded that the victims had likely been killed there before their bodies were dragged to the ballroom. Police sent the bodies for autopsy and began analyzing physical evidence. Fingerprints collected from the weapons were preserved for examination. One of the guns had belonged to John's father, while the other had been purchased by John himself on October 14, 1971. This discovery led detectives to consider that the massacre might have been planned for some time. Initially, there was uncertainty about whether John was a victim or the perpetrator, but a letter found in his room confirmed his responsibility. The letter, addressed to the family's pastor, was dated November 7, 1971. In it, John confessed to killing his mother, wife, and children, shocking everyone who knew him. In the letter, John explained his desire to spare them from suffering and provided contacts of family and friends for the pastor to inform about the tragedy. "I know how this may seem to you, but I want you to know I took special care to ensure there was no pain," he wrote. The pastor described the Lists as regular churchgoers, noting that John even taught Sunday school. The letter also indicated that Helen and the children wished to be cremated, and John requested the pastor to arrange a modest funeral for them. As police interviewed neighbors, they uncovered a different side of the List family, revealing that their seemingly perfect reputation was merely a facade. Initially, the Lists were viewed as a typical ideal American family, disciplined, moral, and religious, highly respected in the community. But over time, neighbors began to notice odd behaviors, realizing that the lists weren't as perfect as they seemed. They were extremely religious and moralistic, yet they also appeared antisocial and somewhat strange. John's behavior, in particular, stood out. A neighbor recalled welcoming the family with a homemade cake, only to be told bluntly by John that his family wasn't friendly and asked to leave. This unwelcoming attitude was noticed by many neighbors over the years. One of Patricia's friends shared with police that John once tore a shirt off Patricia in a fit of anger, disapproving of her choice in front of others. Patricia reportedly felt that her father hated her. Another incident involved Patricia being brought home by the police after wandering the streets with a friend. When called to pick her up, John arrived in full formal attire, wearing a tuxedo in the middle of the night. His behavior with Patricia alarmed neighbors even further. He threatened her life and declared that their days were numbered. John's threats became increasingly frequent, and he occasionally asked his children if they preferred cremation or burial. These revelations led detectives to believe that John had likely been planning the murders for some time. As the investigation continued, detectives discovered that John had canceled newspaper and milk deliveries. The family hadn't attended church since November, and the school had been informed they'd be away caring for Helen's sick mother. These actions ensured that no one would suspect anything unusual at the mansion. On December 9, 1971, John's car was found parked near New York's John F. Kennedy International Airport. It was a Chevrolet Impala with a parking ticket dated November 10, 1971. The police speculated that he might have taken a flight and possibly fled the country, though no records showed he had boarded any plane. The only certainty detectives had was that John was now a month ahead of them. The autopsy reports confirmed that each family member had been killed with the gun found in John's room. All had been shot once in the head, except for John Jr., who had been shot 10 times in the head, neck, and chest. This discrepancy puzzled investigators, as they questioned why John Jr. had met a more violent end than the others. The funeral took place on November 12, 1971. Alma List was buried in St. Lawrence Lutheran Cemetery in Frankenmuth, Michigan, while Helen, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick were laid to rest in Fairview Cemetery in Westfield, New Jersey. Their tombstone read, "Peace in the Eternal Valley." Undercover officers attended the funeral, hoping John might make an appearance, but he never did. The List family murders became a top priority for local authorities, who were determined to capture John List. His photograph was distributed widely across police departments nationwide, with hopes that someone might recognize him. Despite the extensive efforts, John List's whereabouts remained an enigma. Some detectives began to speculate that he might have taken his own life, overwhelmed by guilt. Yet, even after months of intense investigation, no solid leads emerged, and gradually the case went cold. Years passed, and as the original detectives retired, the morbid mystery of the List family fell to a new team of investigators. In 1988, new detectives took charge and decided to reopen it. They believed that bringing the case to a large audience might yield the breakthrough they needed. Their goal was to feature the story on America's Most Wanted, a popular show hosted by John Walsh, who became an advocate for victims' rights following the tragic death of his son, Adam. Initially, the show's producers were skeptical, thinking the case had faded from public memory and that John List was likely dead. But the detectives persisted, and by April 1989, the producers agreed to spotlight the case in an episode. To create a current likeness of John, the detectives collaborated with Frank Bender, a forensic sculptor skilled in reconstructing facial features. Bender used John's psychological profile, developed with the help of specialists to build a realistic representation of what John might look like in 1989. The question loomed over whether John would have changed his appearance, particularly his glasses, a distinctive feature. Some theorized that John might still wear thick, dark frames to project an intellectual or dignified image. John Walsh, deeply invested in victim advocacy, took the case to heart. He wanted a full understanding of John List to communicate his character effectively to viewers. Once the facial reconstruction was complete, the episode of America's Most Wanted aired on May 21, 1989, with the hope that new leads might emerge and finally close the case. Featuring John List as the prime suspect marked a turning point in the investigation. The program reached an audience of around 22 million viewers, making it the oldest case the show had ever covered, and its impact was massive. Alongside a photo of John, the episode presented Bender's lifelike facial sculpture, drawing significant media and public attention. Following the broadcast, over 200 tips poured in from across the country, underscoring the public's engagement. One tip, however, stood out from the rest. In Denver, Colorado, a woman and her daughter were watching the show when they noticed an uncanny resemblance between John List's profile and their neighbor, known as Bob Clark. As more information was revealed, they became convinced that Bob Clark was, in fact, John List. Bob fit the description almost perfectly. He was a Lutheran accountant, dressed conservatively, appeared well-groomed, and was notably reserved. He attended church regularly and, perhaps most telling, had a scar behind his ear. When the facial sculpture appeared on screen with striking accuracy, the women were certain. The glasses and cheeks were what really convinced us, they said. We thought, oh my God, that's Bob. The resemblance was so strong that they had no doubt Bob Clark and John List were the same person. On Thursday, June 1, 1989, just 11 days after the episode aired, one of them contacted the police with her suspicions. She explained that Bob had lived in her neighborhood with his wife, Dolores Miller, but had recently relocated to Richmond, Virginia. FBI agents quickly tracked down Bob Clark at his office in Richmond. When questioned, Bob confirmed his identity as Clark and denied being John List. However, authorities were convinced they had the right man and continued their investigation. A fingerprint comparison confirmed investigators' suspicions. Bob Clark was indeed John List. He was arrested on June 1, 1989. The forensic facial reconstruction used on America's Most Wanted was strikingly accurate. Nearly every detail matched John's appearance at the time, save for a few extra wrinkles. He even wore the same thick-framed glasses that the psychologist had predicted in the reconstruction. Under police questioning, John finally confessed the truth behind the horrific events he'd carried out. With this confession, the eerie story of the List family began to unravel, exposing the grim events that took place at the List house and the circumstances leading to one of America's most notorious murders. John List had been under immense financial strain, with the mansion's mortgage becoming an unbearable burden. Desperation drove him to steal money from his own mother, something he never imagined doing. Meanwhile, Helen struggled with her own issues, neglecting the children and seeking solace from a psychiatrist, even abandoning church, a move John considered unthinkable, fearing it would tarnish his family's pure Lutheran image. Facing a midlife crisis and the humiliating prospect of bankruptcy, John was consumed by dark thoughts. He convinced himself that the modern world was corrupting his family and leading them toward ruin. In his distorted logic, he believed only he could save them from this fate, and ending their lives was an act of mercy that would ensure their place in heaven. On November 9, 1971, John set his horrific plan into motion. He believed that by killing his family, he would receive God's forgiveness, as he was saving them from the devil's influence. That morning began like any other. The children went off to school and Helen had breakfast in the kitchen. John calmly approached her from behind and shot her, watching her collapse to the floor. He then dragged her body to the ballroom and laid it in a sleeping bag, signaling the start of his grim mission. Next, he visited his mother Alma on the mansion's third floor. She greeted him with a kiss, a moment of affection he answered with a fatal shot. Unable to move her body, he covered her face with a towel as if trying to mask his own guilt. John then went to the bank, closed his accounts, and sent letters to the school, all while displaying a chilling indifference to life. Returning home, he made himself a sandwich and waited for the children to come home. Patricia was the first to arrive, unaware of her fate. John shot her as she entered. The same happened to Frederick, whose young life was cut short as soon as he walked through the door. John Jr. was the last to arrive and fought for his life, but his father's relentless shooting, 9 shots in total, proved fatal. "With John, I just had to keep shooting," John would later say, as if recounting a routine task. That night, after placing his family's bodies in the ballroom, John cleaned the house, prepared dinner, and served it in the room where his family now lay lifeless. With religious music playing in the background, he ate one last meal in the mansion. After dinner, John prayed and went to bed, convinced he had completed his mission and achieved peace. The next morning, he adjusted the thermostat, turned on all the lights, and set religious music to play at full volume, creating the illusion that the house was still occupied. Then he vanished, taking on a new identity. In Denver, John List re-emerged as Bob Clark, living a low-profile life to escape the horrific past he left behind. But like a lurking shadow, his crimes would not stay hidden. Just as the police search began to wane and his life seemed to settle, John built a seemingly normal existence. He found work as an accountant, resumed church attendance, and in 1985 married Dolores Miller, a woman he met through their religious community. He told Dolores that his first wife had died of cancer, a lie she believed as she fell in love, unaware of the massacre he had committed. After his arrest, John initially insisted he was Bob Clark. However, while in custody, a prison guard overheard him confessing his crimes to Dolores. The guard reported this, triggering John's trial. During the trial, his defense argued that he was in an unstable mental state, suffering from post-war depression. The prosecution, however, countered that John had merely been going through a midlife crisis and should be held fully accountable for his actions. A psychologist testified that John acted with calculated intent, even timing the murders to ensure no 2 family members were present together. In May 1990, the judge accepted the prosecution's arguments, convicting John List of 5 counts of murder and sentencing him to life in prison without parole. Reflecting on his crimes in his final statement, John said, "I regret the tragedy that happened in 1971. I believe my mental state then made me not responsible." John spent his last 18 years in New Jersey State Prison in Trenton, where he died on March 21, 2008, at 82 from pneumonia complications. Even in his final days, he showed no remorse. For Alma, Helen, Patricia, John Jr., and Frederick, life was tragically and unjustly cut short. The revelation of John's true identity devastated his second wife, Dolores Miller, who could not believe the man she loved was a monster. The emotional toll of the incident weighed heavily on her and the residents of Westfield, many of whom are still haunted by the memory of the tragedy. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. One quiet night in October 2023, a 13-year-old boy made a shocking 911 call that left the Hialeah, Florida, community stunned. His voice was shaky and full of fear as he admitted to something terrible that had just happened in his home, a crime that no one could have expected. With his newborn sister asleep in the next room and his stepfather far away, the boy's confession started an investigation that uncovered dark and surprising details about what took place that night. But why did this young boy do such a terrible thing? And could there be more to the story? The truth is much more complicated than it seems. Irina Garcia, born around 1984, was of Cuban descent and moved to Miami, Florida, with her mother. While not much is known about her early life, she later married Jose Rosa, a man serving in the military, and they welcomed their first child, Derek Rosa, on August 26, 2010. Although Irina and Jose eventually divorced, they maintained a friendly co-parenting relationship. Derek spent weekdays with his mother and stayed with his father every other weekend. He also had a strong bond with his maternal grandmother. Derek grew up as a respectful and well-behaved child, known for his academic achievements and strong character. He was a student at Mater Academy, excelling in his studies, and had dreams of becoming an engineer in the U.S. military. As time passed, Irina found love again with Frank Ramos, a fellow Cuban who worked as a long-distance truck driver. The couple moved into an apartment in Hialeah, Florida. In 2023, Irina became pregnant with her second child. A few days before giving birth, the family captured their joy in a photo shoot, celebrating the upcoming arrival of their daughter, Ashley, born in late September of that year. By all accounts, Irina was a warm and kind person, creating a harmonious and loving home. However, on October 12, 2023, just days after Derek's 13th birthday, their lives were shattered. That day, Derek made a shocking 911 call confessing that he had killed his mother with a knife. His voice was filled with fear and hesitation during the 17-minute call, as he tried to explain to the dispatcher what had happened. He revealed that he was home alone with his mother and his 14-day-old sister who was asleep in her crib. Frank, his stepfather, was away on a trip, testing a truck outside the city. During the call, Derek mentioned that his stepfather had 2 firearms, one of which was in the apartment. After committing the crime, Derek had briefly considered using one of the guns to harm himself, but ultimately decided against it. He also revealed that he had spoken to a friend about the incident, a detail that left authorities stunned and raised more questions. When asked by the dispatcher why he had attacked his mother, Derek provided an answer that was not publicly disclosed. Throughout the call, the dispatcher worked to keep him calm and occupied, while officers traced his location and rushed to the scene. As police approached the home, the tension increased, and the dispatcher urged Derek to keep his hands empty and move away from any weapons. When officers arrived, Derek peacefully surrendered and was taken into custody while neighbors recorded the scene. Inside the home, police found a gruesome sight: Irina's body, lying on the bed covered in blood. Beside her, the newborn baby slept peacefully, unharmed. The infant was later placed in the care of her maternal grandmother. That same night, Derek was interrogated by the Hialeah police. Despite the gravity of his actions, he remained calm and composed during the questioning. He confessed that after going to bed around 10 p.m., he had woken up just after 11:30 p.m., gone to the kitchen, grabbed a knife, and entered his mother's room. While Irina slept next to her baby, Derek attacked her.
What type of knife was it, do you know?
It was just a big size kitchen knife.
That big?
Yeah.
What did you do with the guns?
I grabbed the gun. I pulled back to slide, but I didn't want to shoot myself.
Okay.
I intended to shoot myself before, but I couldn't.
Why did you kill your mother? Do you know?
If I have to say it now,
Yeah, get it off your chest. Absolutely.
I can't wait for a lawyer.
During the interview, Derek detailed the bloodstains on his shirt and hands, explaining they were from the attack. He even demonstrated the size of the knife he used, describing how he first targeted her neck, believing it was a vulnerable spot. During Derek's interrogation, as seen in the video footage, he appeared calm while answering detectives' questions. He admitted that before committing the crime, he had insulted his mother in Spanish. The first stab had startled her, and she only managed to scream once before falling silent. However, Derek's demeanor changed significantly when a detective asked about his reasons for killing his mother. He requested to use the bathroom and then remained quiet for a few moments. He finally questioned whether he needed to answer that question at that time and asked for a lawyer, bringing the interrogation to a close. The forensic examination of Irina revealed a total of 46 wounds, many inflicted on her face. Additionally, the investigation of Derek's phone uncovered disturbing images that horrified those who saw them. Not only had Derek contacted a friend to tell him about the crime, but he had also sent 3 photographs, 2 of his deceased mother and one of himself posing for a chilling selfie with blood on his hands. The friend, whom Derek mentioned both in his 911 call and later to detectives, was someone he had met through online gaming when he was 10 years old. They had never met in person and communicated mostly on weekends. Derek didn't even know his real name, referring to him only by the alias Sweden, which was saved in his phone. The search history on Derek's phone revealed unsettling queries before the crime, such as how to kill someone with a knife, the most effective method to do it, and where to target the body for the quickest result. Authorities noted that Derek had specifically researched the jugular vein. As the sole suspect in his mother's murder, Derek was taken into custody, while investigators confirmed that his stepfather, Frank, had been out of state at the time of the incident, working in Georgia. The community was left in shock, struggling to comprehend how a promising young boy could become entangled in such a tragic event. Neighbors and friends expressed disbelief, remembering Derek as a polite and dedicated student. His family requested privacy as they mourned the loss of Irina. A Hialeah police spokesperson revealed that Derek had been a model student, with no previous issues at home or school. He had no known history of mental health problems that could have explained his actions. On October 27, 2023, the authorities announced that Derek would face a charge of first-degree murder and would be tried as an adult. His request for house arrest under the supervision of his father and grandmother was denied, and he was transferred to the Metro West Detention Center in Doral. Due to his age, he was kept isolated from the general prison population and monitored 24/7, as he was considered a danger to himself. Despite the overwhelming evidence, some rallied in Derek's defense, including his family. His father described him as a respectful student and was baffled by what could have driven his son to such an act. Having served in the military for 22 years, he believed he had instilled strong values in his child. Derek's maternal grandmother referred to him as the best boy in the world, urging people not to misunderstand the situation, as no one knew him better than she did. A campaign titled Save Derek Rosa was launched online, garnering over 23,000 signatures in support of the teenager. The petition raised doubts about Derek's involvement, suggesting that his search history might have been manipulated or that someone else could have used his device. There was also suspicion that Derek, whose first language was English, might not have written the Spanish search terms found on his phone. Some claimed there was a second voice heard during Derek's 911 call and demanded further investigation into other family members, particularly Frank. Although Frank was never a suspect, many speculated about his involvement. Some accused him of manipulating Derek, and rumors about Frank's personal life sparked public interest. Speculation arose that Frank had a second family in his home country, with photos surfacing online showing him with another woman and 2 girls. However, no concrete evidence linked him to a hidden past. After the crime, Frank opposed the defense's request to search the apartment, claiming that Derek's father and other relatives had already removed several items. The prosecution supported Frank's decision, though this refusal added to public suspicion. Frank's lack of public statements further fueled conspiracy theories, with many wondering about his whereabouts following the incident. On December 14th, the trial began. Derek's grandmother, father, and other relatives attended, and several testimonies were given in defense of the teenager. The defense lawyers argued for Derek's transfer to a juvenile detention center, stating that his rights were being violated by keeping him in an adult facility, given that he was a minor. Prosecutors, on the other hand, argued that Derek's current situation ensured he received an education while incarcerated. Testifying in his favor were a counselor and 2 teachers who provided him with personalized lessons to help him continue his high school education. Although the teenager spent around 20 hours a day confined in his cell, he had limited interactions. He met with his math teacher 3 times a week and had language classes for another 3 hours each week. The prison housed 34 other minors, but Derek, being the youngest at 13, had restricted interactions, limited to brief periods of playing soccer and basketball with a single other inmate. Derek's math instructor testified that the boy responded to lessons just like any other student. Meanwhile, his language teacher noted that Derek often expressed confusion during lessons, leading her to suspect he had learning difficulties. However, she also emphasized that Derek was polite and a diligent student. Derek's attorneys argued that he had lost 6 pounds during his first few months in detention. They called a forensic psychologist to testify, although the psychologist had not personally evaluated Derek. The specialist attributed Derek's weight loss to depression caused by isolation and testified that Derek was likely experiencing severe self-harm tendencies, which were not visibly apparent. The psychologist also suggested that Derek could be on the autism spectrum and recommended that he be treated as if he had autism until proven otherwise. The Correctional Health Services psychologist diagnosed Derek with attention deficit hyperactivity disorder and confirmed that he had tendencies towards self-harm. It was notable that this was the first mention of Derek potentially being on the autism spectrum. Up until that point, he had not been diagnosed with any such condition, and his school records from the past 8 years had shown no signs of any deficiencies. Investigators who interacted with Derek in the hours following the crime also testified during this hearing, and the disturbing video of his confession was shown to the court. This was one of the few moments when Derek lowered his head and appeared to cry. Additionally, the state attorney's office released 2 new security videos as evidence. In the first video, Derek is seen opening the door to the apartment where his mother Irina is seated, holding the newborn baby. According to some sources, there was an argument between them. The second video shows Derek standing by his mother's bed as she slept, moments before her life was taken. The court also viewed photographs of the crime scene, including the weapon used. With these grim details, prosecutors aimed to prevent the judge from authorizing Derek's transfer to a juvenile detention center, insisting that he posed a danger to the community. After several days of testimony, the judge expressed concern over the relatively small amount of time Derek was allowed outside his cell but found no clear violation of his constitutional rights. As a result, the defense's request for a transfer to a juvenile facility was denied, and the judge ordered Derek to remain in the adult detention center. In an emotional hearing on Thursday, February 15th, defense attorneys presented 26 letters written by family members, all emphasizing that Derek was a kind, loving child and that the crime did not reflect his true character. The courtroom was filled with tension and hope as the letters were read aloud, highlighting the deep emotional impact of the situation on Derek's family and supporters. Derek's grandmother, father, and other family members attended the hearing, their faces filled with concern and love. Supporters from different parts of the United States had also traveled to be there, wearing T-shirts emblazoned with "Save Derek." Their presence was a powerful display of unwavering support for the young boy. Many in attendance echoed the sentiment that a child is innocent until proven guilty, and they firmly believed Derek Rosa could not have committed such a heinous act. His maternal grandmother emphasized that Derek was not an adult, but still a child who needed guidance. His biological father pleaded for leniency and a second chance to help Derek grow and learn from his mistakes. Both underscored the strong family support surrounding him. The letters submitted on Derek's behalf mostly asked the court not to treat him as an adult in the legal process. Derek's defense team argued that they were not prepared for trial because the prosecution had not provided all the necessary evidence. They pointed out key missing elements such as witness reports, footage from the baby monitor, clothing, and other personal items. Derek's attorney requested a court order forcing the prosecution to hand over the missing evidence or to exclude it from the case if it wasn't produced by a specific deadline. However, the prosecution had also been unable to access data from Derek's computer, tablets, and gaming consoles. The judge overseeing the case confirmed that there were 750 photos and multiple witness statements involved and ordered the prosecution to submit all unedited information. A new hearing date was set, but the judge maintained his decision to try Derek as an adult. Despite the judge's expressed urgency to expedite the trial, citing concerns about Derek's conditions in detention, the case became tangled in a series of hearings and delays. Throughout the proceedings, the defense petitioned for Derek to be declared indigent, arguing that the family lacked the financial resources to afford private attorneys. They requested that the state cover the costs for case preparation, including mental health experts, forensic analysis, and witness testimonies. At the most recent hearing, held on September 21, 2024, Derek appeared virtually and remained silent. His family broke down in tears upon seeing him on the screen, overwhelmed with emotion and pain. Concerned about the lengthy periods Derek spent in isolation, his lawyers once again petitioned to transfer him from the adult jail to a juvenile detention center. According to news reports, March records indicated that Derek had only been out of his cell for a total of 119 hours, with just 5 hours devoted to his education. Despite these revelations, the judge denied the request once again. New developments emerged when the prosecution identified Derek's mysterious online friend from the night of the crime. Through electronic device analysis, detectives traced the phone's owner and conducted an interrogation. Derek's trial is scheduled for December 2, 2024, with at least 28 witnesses expected to testify. The prosecution plans to present video testimony from Sweden, Derek's online friend. Meanwhile, the defense has reportedly obtained text messages between the Hialeah police detectives and Derek's stepfather, which could shed light on their relationship and whether any influence or manipulation took place before the crime. This ongoing investigation focuses on official information, witness statements, and family accounts. As the case is still unresolved, we refrain from making any judgments regarding Derek's innocence or guilt. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. It was a seemingly ordinary morning in March when Jason Wesch dropped off his 3-year-old daughter, Hannah, at her nanny's house, just like he had done many times before. Hannah, full of innocence, gave her father a kiss goodbye and walked into the home of Lindsay, a woman Jason trusted with his child's care. But within hours, everything changed. Jason received a frantic call from Lindsay. Hannah had collapsed. Paramedics rushed the little girl to the hospital in critical condition, but the explanations didn't add up. How could a seemingly minor fall lead to such a dire situation? As the hours passed, doctors made a chilling discovery about Hannah's injuries, raising more questions than answers. Something terrible had happened that morning, but the truth was far more shocking than anyone could have imagined. Hannah Wesch was born on January 11, 2015, in the city of Cincinnati, Ohio. From the moment she came into the world, she faced many challenges. Hannah was the daughter of Jason Wesch and Adrienne Latham, a woman struggling with heroin addiction who was involved in drug dealing. Despite her substance abuse, Adrienne sought medical help for her unborn child's well-being once she discovered she was pregnant. She underwent methadone treatment, which ultimately saved Hannah's life, though the baby was born with the same addiction her mother battled. Shortly after Hannah's birth, Adrienne was incarcerated due to her ongoing struggles with drugs. Hannah was left in the care of her father, Jason, who already had 2 daughters from a previous relationship. When Hannah was just 4 months old, Jason lost his job. With few options, he moved in with his brother, who was also facing tough times. Hannah was able to stay inside the house, but Jason had to sleep in his car because there wasn't enough room for him. This difficult situation lasted nearly 2 years until Jason found stable work in construction in Hamilton, Ohio. He rented a small house, and it seemed like life was starting to improve for him and his 2-year-old daughter. However, there was still a major hurdle. He needed reliable childcare while working long hours. One of Jason's co-workers, Timothy Smith, lived on the same street. Timothy and his partner, Lindsay Parton, had 2 daughters, aged 4 and 3. Recognizing Jason's struggle to balance work and caring for Hannah, Timothy suggested that Lindsay, who already looked after children, could watch Hannah during the day. To reassure Jason, Timothy explained that Lindsay had a background in early childhood education and was already taking care of another child. Though Lindsay initially hesitated, feeling overwhelmed by the responsibility of looking after 4 children, Timothy persuaded her by pointing out that they needed the extra money. Jason, grateful for the solution, readily accepted the offer. Lindsay, with her warm smile, appeared to be a caring, hard-working mother. Besides babysitting, she also helped her father with various tasks and sold products from a catalog. Jason believed this was the perfect arrangement. Not only would Hannah have a safe place to stay, but she'd also have playmates her own age. Jason and Lindsay agreed on $30 per day for Hannah's care, with Jason dropping her off at 7 a.m. and picking her up after work, depending on how long his shifts were. In July 2017, Hannah spent her first day at Lindsay's house, and within days, Lindsay posted a picture of the little girl on social media, captioned, "Welcome, sweet Hannah," signaling that she was comfortable with her new role. For 8 months, everything seemed to run smoothly. Lindsay looked after Hannah, feeding her, washing her clothes, and even taking her to dance classes. Despite Jason sometimes falling behind on payments, Lindsay never refused to watch Hannah. On Wednesday, March 7, 2018, Lindsay mentioned to Jason that Hannah had fallen off a small toy train but seemed fine. Jason didn't notice anything unusual and assumed it was just a minor accident. The next day, he dropped Hannah off as usual at 7 a.m. Hannah kissed her father goodbye and walked into Lindsay's house as she always did. But shortly after, according to Lindsay, Hannah uttered 2 words, donut and couch, before collapsing and hitting her head on the garage floor. Alarmed, Lindsay placed her on a couch and immediately called Jason, who was still nearby, and then dialed 911. At just past 7 a.m., a young emergency operator answered the call. Lindsay, identifying herself, explained that a 3-year-old girl had collapsed.
I'm so sorry that has happened.
Okay. Is she still unconscious, correct?
Yes.
Okay.
No, she's not unconscious. Her eyes are open and she's like just gasping for air.
What's the matter?
Fucking shock or something.
I don't know what the fuck could be wrong with her.
I don't either. She was fine. Who just walked in the house?
She got up, brushed her teeth,
I don't
and
understand.
Lindsay, it's okay. They're on the way.
The call lasted 13 minutes, during which Lindsay could be heard urging Hannah to wake up and explaining that the child had fallen the previous day but seemed fine at the time. Jason arrived during the call, his voice also recorded in the frantic moments before paramedics arrived and rushed Hannah to Cincinnati Children's Hospital in critical condition. Police were quick to respond to the scene. For many of the investigators, the timeline was troubling. It was hard to believe that Hannah had been walking and talking moments before, only to suddenly collapse in such a dire state. From the start, detectives were convinced that either Lindsay or Jason was responsible for what had happened. As Hannah fought for her life in the hospital, Jason was interviewed by police. Meanwhile, Lindsay was taken to the station, where she waived her right to an attorney and agreed to speak. As the investigation deepened, officers uncovered that Lindsay had been dealing with personal problems during the months she was caring for the 4 young children. Weeks before the tragic incident with Hannah, Lindsay had experienced a miscarriage, leaving her emotionally unstable. Her relationship with Timothy was also in crisis at the time. As the investigation progressed, officers uncovered troubling details that had previously gone unnoticed, raising red flags. It came to light that during the 8 months Lindsay had been caring for Hannah, there were several alleged accidents that she dismissed as minor. One such incident involved Hannah falling onto gravel while playing outside, leaving her with a deep cut on her chin and a black eye. In another case, Hannah was riding a toy with wheels when the wheels inexplicably came off, causing her to fall and hit her head on the ground. On the morning of the incident, Lindsay's story shifted multiple times, and she contradicted herself. After piecing things together, detectives concluded that Hannah hadn't simply lost consciousness at the house. In reality, the child had spilled ketchup in the bathroom, and in a fit of rage, the caretaker had reacted violently. Lindsay eventually confessed that in her frustration, she shook Hannah, hit her on the head, and pushed her. Following an hour-and-a-half-long interrogation, Lindsay was allowed to go home to her children but decided to visit the hospital to check on Hannah, where she was denied entry. Initially, Jason thought his daughter might have suffered from a brain aneurysm as he heard paramedics suggest this possibility. He believed she would recover. However, the doctor who examined Hannah gave a far more grim explanation. He reported that Hannah had suffered a massive head injury, one consistent with being forcefully thrown against concrete from a significant height. The next morning, Lindsay was arrested. The grim news spread quickly, soon reaching Hannah's devastated father, Jason. His grief turned to fury as he struggled to comprehend how Lindsay could have inflicted such injuries on his little girl. Hannah had undergone several surgeries to relieve pressure on her brain, including one that required part of her skull to be removed. Despite the medical team's best efforts and Hannah's own fight for survival, she passed away 10 days after being admitted to the hospital. Jason, who had set up several GoFundMe accounts to raise money for his daughter's treatment, used the $10,000 collected to pay for Hannah's funeral expenses. The service was held on Thursday, March 22nd, and included an emotional balloon release in the young girl's memory before her burial. After this difficult moment, Jason was cleared of any suspicion following his successful polygraph test. Meanwhile, Lindsay was behind bars as the investigation continued. A video surfaced showing the moment investigators informed Lindsay of Hannah's death. Captured on police cameras, Lindsay later claimed to the media that her confession had been coerced. She accused the detectives of pressuring her to admit that she had struck and shaken Hannah, saying they implied this was a common occurrence in such cases. Lindsay maintained that she had not made the confession willingly and only wanted the ordeal to end so she could return to her children. Based on the evidence, the timeline reconstruction, and Lindsay's own words, she was charged with homicide. The report submitted to the court indicated that Hannah had begun to whimper shortly after Jason dropped her off that day. While playing with a ketchup bottle in the bathroom, Lindsay, enraged, had shaken her, hit her, and thrown her to the ground. More disturbing facts came to light. Authorities revealed that Lindsay had taken it upon herself not just to care for Hannah, but also to discipline her, believing that the child needed structure since her mother was in prison. While this could have been seen as a noble intention, Lindsay's approach to discipline involved physical punishment. She claimed that Jason had agreed to her methods, allowing her to raise Hannah. In April 2019, Lindsay's trial began. Over 8 days, the court heard harrowing testimony. The jury learned how Lindsay had confessed to abusing Hannah to the police. She admitted that she had slapped the child in the days leading up to the incident and violently shook her on the day of her collapse. The defense argued that Lindsay's confession had been coerced by the police, but the court reviewed her interviews and concluded that this was not the case. The officers had read her rights, and she had voluntarily signed waivers. There was no indication in the detective's behavior or language that suggested Lindsay had been forced or threatened into confessing. One of the most painful moments for Hannah's family came when a report from the doctors at Cincinnati Children's Hospital was presented. The report detailed the devastating head trauma Hannah had sustained. It stated that after suffering such a severe brain and skull injury, it would have been impossible for Hannah to walk or talk for more than a few seconds, or at most a couple of minutes, ruling out any possibility that the injury occurred before she entered Lindsay's home. The specialists added that the forceful impact had caused immediate unconsciousness, severe hemorrhaging, and ultimately brain death. During the hearings, the prosecution displayed a photo of Hannah taken just days before March 8th, showing her seated in her car seat, smiling and without any visible injuries. This image starkly contrasted with the critical condition she was in following the incident. Lindsay's defense team tried to divert attention to Jason by showing photos of his messy and dirty apartment, including the mattress where Hannah slept. The images showed a floor covered in clothes, toys, and food remnants, which the defense claimed created an unsafe environment for the child. The defense strategy aimed to portray Jason as a liar, discrediting his testimony. Lindsay's lawyers argued that Jason had been dishonest, as he failed to mention that a friend had been staying at his home during those days. They suggested that, had the police been aware of this person's presence, he might have been a suspect. They also pointed out that Jason lied in his initial statement, claiming that he had taken Hannah to a supermarket on the night of March 7th to buy milk, yet detectives found no milk at his house. However, the court ruled that these defense points were irrelevant. The doctors had confirmed beyond doubt that the injuries causing Hannah's death occurred just moments before her collapse, pointing directly at Lindsay as the responsible party. Jason admitted that his claim about the supermarket visit was due to the confusion and emotional distress he felt while his daughter was in critical condition at the hospital. He expressed anger toward Lindsay's defense team for their remarks, stating that the disorder in his home did not mean he had harmed his daughter. Jason called Lindsay a manipulative liar, asserting that he had never approved of her disciplining Hannah with violence, nor was he aware of it. He also regretted that his daughter hadn't told him about the abuse. However, Hannah had confided in her maternal grandfather, who testified during the trial. He recalled how, even though his daughter Adrian was in prison, he spent Sundays with his granddaughter. On one occasion, he noticed bruises on Hannah's chest. When he asked how she got them, Hannah said it was from her nanny. It was unclear whether he communicated this to Jason, but no steps were taken to protect the child. During another hearing, the prosecution presented Lindsay's internet search history from the day before Hannah's fatal injury. Lindsay had looked up how to treat or hide bruises. The prosecution argued that this was an attempt to conceal the injury she had inflicted on Hannah, while the defense claimed Lindsay suspected Jason of abusing his daughter. Amid the courtroom drama, a media frenzy unfolded outside, with reporters battling for exclusive stories. Around this time, it was revealed that Jason hadn't informed Lindsay that Hannah had been born with a heroin addiction and had hepatitis C, which could have posed a risk to the other children under her care. It was also reported that Jason ignored a March 5th incident in which Lindsay claimed that Hannah refused to participate in dance class due to severe headaches. When asked about these claims, Jason dismissed them, insisting that Lindsay was lying as she always had. In the final hearing, both sides presented their closing arguments. The defense maintained that Hannah's fatal injuries were the result of earlier falls, and Lindsay had already warned Jason about Hannah's previous head injury the day before the collapse. On the other hand, the prosecution argued that Hannah's injuries were far too severe to be the result of a simple childhood accident and were clear evidence of abuse. They asserted that Lindsay, frustrated by the ketchup spill in the bathroom, had resorted to extreme disciplinary measures. At the end of the trial, Hannah's mother, Adrienne, submitted a victim impact statement to be read in court. In it, she wrote that the night Hannah died, many lives were forever changed, losing both hope and the future. She expressed how she would never smile the same way again after the loss of her brave daughter, and that she would miss Hannah with every fiber of her being. After 12 hours of deliberation, the jury found Lindsay guilty of murder, involuntary manslaughter, and 4 counts of child endangerment. She was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole for at least 18 years. At the conclusion of the trial, Jason had the opportunity to address Lindsay directly. Looking her in the eye, he expressed his anger and said he hoped she would receive the same treatment in prison that she had inflicted on his daughter. Lindsay was then transported to a prison where she was held in solitary confinement, separated from other inmates, as child killers are often targeted in prison. Lindsay's defense team filed an appeal, but in September 2020, her sentence was upheld by the appellate court. They later brought the case to the Ohio Supreme Court, but they were unsuccessful there as well. Her family, left financially drained, had spent $75,000 on her defense. Meanwhile, it was revealed that her former partner, Timothy, had been charged with multiple counts of sexual assault involving minors. He pleaded guilty to a lesser charge and was also sent to prison. Thus, both of the people who had cared for Hannah while Jason worked were now behind bars. Since Hannah's birth, nothing in her life had been secure. In 2022, 3 years after her conviction, Lindsay, now 41, gave a series of interviews from prison. In these interviews, she expressed her longing to hold her daughters, who were now 9 and 10 years old. She reiterated her belief that she didn't deserve to be in prison and continued to deny causing Hannah's fatal injuries. Lindsay, who spoke more in these interviews than she had during her trial, recalled that when she first met Jason, he was dressed in dirty clothes, and Hannah appeared disheveled with her face stained by spaghetti sauce. She emphasized the family's poor financial state and claimed there were signs that something was wrong with Hannah, who had suffered from frequent headaches that worsened in the days before her death and had fallen multiple times. Lindsay also argued that her conviction was influenced by Jason's successful polygraph test and the powerful impact of the autopsy photos presented to the jury. Despite the widespread anger toward her, her family created a social media page titled "Lindsay is Innocent," with the goal of pushing for a review of her case. They remained convinced that the police investigation had been flawed. Additionally, they pointed out that the other child Lindsay cared for had no signs of abuse, as confirmed by medical evaluations. In statements after the trial, Hannah's grandfather expressed deep sorrow over the loss of both his granddaughter and his daughter, Adrienne, who passed away on May 1, 2023, at the age of 34. As of October 2024, when this investigation concluded, Lindsay remained incarcerated in a maximum security facility where she helped other inmates earn their high school diplomas and assisted them in preparing release reports. She continued to hold on to hope that she would be free before her daughters stopped recognizing her. For his part, Jason summarized his pain by saying that he had trusted Lindsay to care for his daughter, never imagining that she would become the target of repeated abuse, culminating in her death. He said he would never be able to forgive her and hoped that she would not only face human justice, but also be held accountable in the afterlife. In his view, Lindsay was exactly where she belonged, and he wished for her to spend every remaining day of her life behind bars. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations. Rick and Susanna lived what seemed like an ideal life. They owned a large home in a quiet suburb, had 2 loving children, and enjoyed financial security from their well-established careers. On the surface, everything was perfect. Yet, beneath this calm exterior, troubling secrets simmered within the walls of the Walmsley family home. It wasn't until an unexpected 911 call set events in motion that the truth began to emerge. Just before the holiday season in the small town of Mansfield, Texas, local police received a mysterious open-line call. Responding quickly, they arrived to find the home's side door unlocked and 2 garages wide open. What awaited them inside was a horrific discovery. Rick Walmsley, a respected accountant, and his always optimistic wife had tragically lost their lives in their own home. As the investigation unfolded, it became clear that the tragic incident had taken place well before the 911 call had even been made. Rick and Susanna Walmsley first met as classmates in Oklahoma during the 1970s. Though they didn't become high school sweethearts, they left an impression on each other. Years later, as Rick pursued his studies at Oklahoma State University and Susanna attended a Christian college, their paths crossed once more. Their old connection reignited, and before long, what began as a casual reconnection turned into something more serious. The two began dating, and soon enough, they knew they wanted to build a life together. They married, and in 1978, their daughter Sarah was born. 6 years later, they welcomed their son Andrew. Rick found success as a certified accountant, working in the oil and gas industry, and over the years, his career saw the family relocate several times. Eventually, they settled in Fort Worth, Texas, along the banks of the Trinity River, a large yet tranquil city steeped in history. Rick opened his own accounting firm from his home office, providing the family with a comfortable income. By 2003, the Walmsleys lived in the upscale community of Mansfield, just 20 miles from Fort Worth. Their daughter Sarah, now 25, had become a mother and moved into her own apartment. Their 19-year-old son, Andrew, had just graduated from high school and was attending college part-time while working at a mini golf course. Rick and Susanna were celebrating a happy life together, having marked their 25th wedding anniversary that summer with friends and family. As Christmas 2003 approached, Susanna eagerly prepared for their holiday celebrations, adorning the house with festive decorations and carefully selecting gifts for her loved ones. The living room sparkled with lights, and a large Christmas tree stood proudly, surrounded by presents wrapped with care. Everything seemed perfect for the family's 25th Christmas together. But the peaceful scene in Mansfield was shattered on December 11, 2003. At 11:41 p.m., a 911 dispatcher received a call from the Walmsley residence. On the other end, there was only silence, indicating that someone may have been in distress but unable to speak. Acting quickly, the dispatcher sent officers to the home. Upon arrival, the police found the side door leading to the garage open, but no one responded to their knocks or rings at the door. Once inside, officers were confronted with a grim sight. Susanna Walmsley, 45, was found lying cold on the living room couch. Rick, 46, was discovered in the foyer near the front door, lifeless in a pool of blood. The emergency responders quickly confirmed that both had been dead for some time. The investigation revealed horrifying details. Susanna had been shot and stabbed multiple times, even after she had likely passed away. It appeared she had been attacked while resting in the living room. Nearby, detectives found bloody palm prints, a bullet, and fragments of a broken hair clip, all crucial pieces of evidence. Rick had also been shot and stabbed, but his injuries suggested he had fought back against the attacker before succumbing to his wounds. A tuft of hair in his hand pointed to a violent struggle. Despite initial suspicions of a robbery, the discovery of $15,000 in cash left untouched in the master bedroom led investigators to dismiss that theory. Nothing of value had been taken, and there were no signs of forced entry. Neighbors and friends, stunned by the tragedy, could not fathom who might have wanted to harm the Walmsleys. Rick and Susanna were beloved members of the community, known for their kindness and hospitality. Outwardly, the Walmsleys had a picture-perfect life. Rick's accounting practice flourished, and Susanna took pride in caring for their home and children. Yet, the horrifying events behind the closed doors of their house painted a starkly different picture of what was happening within their family. According to those close to the Walmsley family, tension often simmered beneath the surface, especially when it came to their children, Sarah and Andrew. As a teenager, Sarah was sent away from the family home due to what her parents saw as inappropriate behavior. This led to her becoming pregnant at 19 and entering a turbulent relationship with her daughter's father. Her relationship with her younger brother Andrew was equally strained, as the siblings constantly quarreled, never developing a close bond. Sarah's ex-boyfriend shared that the Walmsleys were skeptical of outsiders, often believing that even their friends had ulterior motives, assuming they only wanted something from them. Despite their growing financial success, it seemed to bring more tension than joy to their lives. There were rumors that Rick and Susanna's marriage wasn't as stable as it appeared, though they did their best to maintain an image of happiness in public. The Walmsleys had a clear agreement with their children. As long as they were enrolled in college, they would receive financial support. While Sarah didn't follow through, Andrew managed to convince his parents that he would keep his end of the deal. To reward him, they bought him a new white Mustang, covered his insurance, and gave him money for his expenses. Though Andrew lived at home without contributing financially, things seemed peaceful, at least on the surface. However, Andrew had also dropped out of college without telling his parents. When Rick and Susanna discovered the truth, they cut off his financial support but did not go as far as to kick him out of the house. As tensions lingered, 19-year-old Andrew spent most of his free time with friends at a local pancake house, a popular hangout spot. It was there that he met 19-year-old Chelsea Richardson, introduced by a friend. On the morning of December 11, 2003, Sarah was informed about her parents' deaths at 4 a.m., but Andrew was nowhere to be found. The police had already turned to the media, asking for help in locating his white Mustang. While forensic teams continued working at the Walmsley house, Andrew and his girlfriend Chelsea unexpectedly pulled up in the Mustang. The two had been staying at Chelsea's house for the past few days and claimed they had just learned about the tragedy from watching the news. Both were immediately taken to the police station for questioning. During his 45-minute interview, Andrew told officers that he hadn't been home in days and hadn't spoken to his parents. He revealed that he had been staying with Chelsea the entire time. Though there were fresh scratches on his hand, nothing else in his story seemed suspicious, and he was free to leave. However, before leaving, the police asked him to sign a consent form allowing them to search his car. Later, Andrew told his sister that investigators would likely find their mother's blood in the Mustang. He explained that Susanna had recently cut her finger and for some reason decided to drive his car to the store afterward. While this could account for the blood traces, Chelsea's story aligned with Andrew's, and she confirmed that they had been together for the past 2 days. The couple had spent most of their time playing a Japanese, a fantasy battle game that brought them closer. Their bond over the game was so strong that they had begun discussing marriage, feeling like they had found in each other a perfect match. Chelsea Richardson's mother fully supported her daughter's relationship and was fond of her new boyfriend, Andrew Walmsley. However, Rick and Susanna were less than thrilled about their son's choice. They had envisioned a different kind of partner for Andrew, someone who would align more with their affluent lifestyle. The Richardsons, who lived on the outskirts of Fort Worth in a working-class neighborhood, were far from the upscale homes of Mansfield. Chelsea's family had faced hardships, especially after her father's unexpected death from a heart attack. Her mother often worked multiple jobs just to keep the household running. Despite their financial struggles, the Richardsons were known for their generosity. Chelsea, with her extroverted and bubbly personality, was popular at school, earning her the nickname Bubbles. She was especially close to her best friend, Susanna Toledano, who frequently stayed at the Richardson home whenever she had issues with her own family. On the night of the Walmsley murders, Andrew, Chelsea, and Susanna were together, spending time at Chelsea's ex-boyfriend Jeremy's house. Jeremy confirmed their alibi, claiming that they had been with him the entire time. Despite this, Sarah Walmsley, Andrew's sister, suggested to police that her ex might have been involved in their parents' deaths. She mentioned that they had recently been fighting over custody issues, and she had even threatened to involve Child Protective Services. 1 month prior to the tragedy, another suspicious event occurred. While driving home after horseback riding lessons, the Walmsley family's Jeep was hit by what they initially thought was a large rock. However, upon inspection, they discovered a bullet hole in the rear of the vehicle. Although frightened, Susanna Walmsley made 2 phone calls, first to her son Andrew rather than the police. She had thought the car trailing them belonged to Andrew, but after the shooting she realized it was not. Despite Sarah's suspicions that her ex might have been involved, investigators eventually ruled him out as a suspect. Attention soon turned to the Walmsley children, particularly because Rick and Susanna's estate included a $1 million life insurance policy and significant assets. Both Sarah and Andrew stood to inherit substantial wealth. However, forensic evidence didn't initially link the siblings to the crime scene, and Andrew's alibi appeared solid. Even though blood was found in the back of Andrew's Mustang, the car had been meticulously cleaned, and investigators couldn't determine whose blood it was. As months passed without significant progress, the investigation hit a standstill. The district attorney decided to convene a grand jury, issuing subpoenas to key individuals connected to the Walmsleys. Jeremy once again testified that Andrew, Chelsea, and Susanna had been with him the night of the murders, offering them a solid alibi. Susanna even voluntarily provided a DNA sample for comparison with evidence found at the crime scene. The investigation took a pivotal turn when Susanna's DNA was matched to the strand of hair found in Rick Walmsley's hand and the broken hair clip left at the scene. This discovery shattered the notion of an outsider being responsible. Susanna was arrested and faced the possibility of the death penalty. Realizing the severity of her situation, Susanna began to talk. She initially claimed that on the night of the murders, she had been with a friend, a 25-year-old man named Hilario Cardenas, who had a gun and needed money. According to her, Hilario entered the Walmsley home alone while she waited outside. However, as investigators dug deeper, they suspected that the truth was far more complicated than Susanna's initial story. Susanna Toledano initially claimed that after hearing gunshots, she rushed to the scene. According to her, Rick Walmsley, the family patriarch, begged her to stop the attack, but she insisted she wasn't truly involved and had no way to prevent it. However, this story quickly began to unravel. So who was Hilario Cardenas? Hilario, a night manager at a local restaurant where Andrew, Chelsea, and Susanna often spent time, had become familiar with the group. He had a young daughter to care for and was in desperate need of money. It was through his friendship with Andrew that Hilario learned of the Walmsley family's wealth. During questioning, Hilario denied taking part in the murders but did admit to purchasing a gun for $200 at Andrew's request. The teenagers, Andrew, Chelsea, and Susanna, wanted to practice shooting at a friend's farm. Investigators began verifying Hilario's story, starting with the owner of the property where the group had allegedly practiced. The owner, a friend of Chelsea's mother, confirmed that the teenagers had indeed visited her 3-acre plot to shoot at a nearby pond. She also stated that she had no knowledge of Hilario, who later gained the trust of investigators by passing a polygraph test. Forensic teams drained the pond on the property and recovered bullets that matched those found at the Walmsley home. This proved that the group had been practicing their shooting skills for months in preparation for the crime. With the discovery of matching ballistics, Susanna's initial claim about Hilario leading the attack fell apart. Given another chance to tell the truth, Susanna changed her story. This time, she implicated her best friend Chelsea and revealed a more detailed version of the events. According to Susanna's revised account, the 3 teenagers had spent numerous nights at a local cafe plotting the murder. They believed that once Rick and his wife were dead, Andrew would inherit over $1 million, and the friends could live a carefree life together. Susanna dreamed of quitting her low-paying job and buying a new car. The group convinced Hilario to purchase the gun. After honing their shooting skills at the farm, they devised their first plan, to shoot at Rick's Jeep's gas tank, hoping to blow it up and eliminate Rick, his wife, and Sarah all at once. However, when Susanna, riding in the white Mustang behind the Jeep, missed her shot, the group switched to Plan B, breaking into the Walmsley home in the middle of the night and staging the scene to look like a robbery. After the failed car attack, Chelsea became enraged and pressured Susanna to finish the job. On the night of December 11, 2003, the group made their second attempt. Armed with a gun, Susanna entered the house, while Andrew and Chelsea carried knives. Susanna confessed to shooting Susanna Walmsley while she lay on the couch. Andrew then led her to the master bedroom where she fired at Rick but missed, hitting the headboard instead. Rick woke up and fought back, leading to a struggle. During the chaos, Andrew took the gun from Susanna, handed her a knife, and instructed her to check on his mother. Susanna saw Rick kneeling, pleading with Chelsea, asking, "Why?" Chelsea coldly replied, "Because I'm pregnant," before Rick was shot. Susanna wasn't sure who pulled the trigger but knew that multiple knife wounds were inflicted on Rick after the shot was fired. In exchange for testifying against her friends, Susanna was able to avoid the death penalty that now loomed over Chelsea and Andrew. Despite Susanna's earlier lies, her final version of the story became the foundation of the prosecution's case. Friends of the Walmsley family found it difficult to believe that Andrew, raised by loving parents, could have been involved in their deaths. However, the testimony of Susanna was damning. On July 1, 2004, 7 months after the murders, the authorities formally charged Andrew and Chelsea with the killings. Chelsea's behavior in prison didn't help her case. She boasted about her involvement to cellmates and even attempted to convince some to fabricate an alibi for her. Her initial alibi, provided by Jeremy, fell apart when Jeremy admitted that he wasn't with the group that night, having been manipulated into lying. Chelsea, once a bubbly high school student, was painted as the mastermind behind the entire operation. The prosecution argued that she manipulated Andrew into believing they would be better off without his family and persuaded Susanna to carry out the killings. Chelsea even wrote a note to Susanna from jail, begging her to place the blame on Hilario and pleading that she and Andrew's unborn child deserved a future. Susanna, however, doubted that Chelsea was actually pregnant. Susanna's testimony was crucial in securing convictions against both Chelsea and Andrew. After a swift deliberation, the jury found Chelsea guilty of capital murder. They sentenced her to death by lethal injection. Andrew's defense team, citing his schizoid personality disorder, managed to convince the jury to spare him from death row. Instead, Andrew was sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole after 2044. During his trial in 2006, Andrew claimed that he killed his parents due to years of emotional and physical abuse, but the jury rejected his defense. Hilario, though not directly involved in the murders, was found guilty of conspiracy to commit a felony and sentenced to 50 years in prison with the possibility of parole in 2023. Chelsea, who was once slated for execution, had her sentence reduced to life in prison in 2012 after Susanna's testimony raised doubts about her role as the primary instigator. As for Susanna, she remains incarcerated with the possibility of parole in 2034. What started as a plot for a carefree life left the trio with long prison sentences, ensuring they won't have to worry about their futures for many years to come. Thanks for tuning in to Unreal True Crime. If you're intrigued by mysteries from around the world, check out our new channel, Latin Crimes, where we dive into the gripping true crime stories of Latin America. Don't miss out. Subscribe now for more thrilling investigations.